Okay, for our second talk this session, I'd like to welcome Amanda Hogan. Amanda's the ICT Integration Coordinator and Computing Teacher at Tara Anglican School for Girls. She's taught computing for the last 8 years and ICT integration for the last 5. She's the recipient of the 2015 ICT New South Wales ICT Teacher of the Year Award, is a Google certified innovator. She's also a regular volunteer and content creator for the Girls Programming Network. So, welcome, Amanda.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is more of a chat than it is a multi-slide presentation. I'm going to do some show and tell. I'm going to tell you about our story. Basically, the problem I'm trying to solve with this talk is that lots of people use Python, but then what do you do for UI? Because it is a syllabus requirement for most of our curriculums. And so, yeah, Tim covered quite a lot of the different options, and I'm going to cover one that in detail. And it is bumps and all. I'm going to tell you what we love about it and what's great and what's really working for us. And on the other hand, I'm going to tell you what drives me mad. This is the plan for what's happening. I am a computer science graduate a million years ago, and then I've worked in industry, and 12 years ago, I had a kid and got out of IT and decided I had all this maternity leave, I'll just go get my dip ed. And so I went into teaching. It was all a bit of a confluence of things, but I like the fact that I'm in a girls' school, I'm trying to make a difference. And what Viv said earlier was really true. I'm at one of those snotty private girls' schools, and we're losing the girls in droves. We had a bit of a bump for a while where computing was cool, and parents were pushing girls to be like their brothers, and it's really dropped, and I don't know why. I think maybe it's because they take laptops to school, and so if you use a laptop every day, then clearly you know about computing, so you don't have to study computing, you do it. And that's really false. Anyway, so we have this really lousy rate of students taking subject in 11 and 12. And about 5 or 6 years ago, my head of department at the time was told we're probably going to have to kill software. And it's a very common story across lots of girls' schools. If you can't get the numbers, you can't warrant the teaching time. And so he, and bless him, ran around trying to work out what the heck he could do to fix this. And that was, he took some grant money and developed an online course. So our software design for New South Wales, and yes, I'm in the state that has not yet adopted the digital technologies curriculum. Our software design course is an online course. And if the girls are at Tara, then they're in my classroom. And if they're girls or boys anywhere else in the state, then they can log into, used to be Moodle, we've just implemented Canvas, but into a web interface that then has week-by-week activities, and we heavily use Grok Learning. It's kind of our virtual textbook, and then they submit things to me and I give them feedback. It's hard. It's hard for those kids that are away, just because they don't have that constant feedback of what they're doing wrong. And so that's a bit of where we came from, and I think that's why we ended up with Kivy, because before we implemented the online course, 5 or 6 years ago, we were using Adobe Flex. That died its own death. And we're also using VB, and first of all, they're really old technologies, they're really old thinking, and the kids were really fixated on the UI and not so much on what they were doing and solving the problem. And so that's a negative. But on the other side, it's also licensing issues. And so you can't have students join your course from a different school who has different technologies if we have to solve that problem of licensing across schools. It was just going to be a nightmare. So we needed open source. And So then that's when we implemented Python, just for 11 and 12 to start with, and then we've pushed it back down into 9 and 10. I think it's great. I agree with everything everybody said today, that it follows pseudocode really closely. It's good for layout and ensuring that the girls, sorry, I'm going to say girls a lot because I'm a girls' school teacher, but the students makes them format properly, makes them think about, you know, is this inside the if statement or is it outside? That kind of stuff. Python's great, but UI is terrible. And I'm going to show you something. This is, I have Hello World for T-Kinter. I've lost it. There it is. So Hello World for T-Kinter is really, really quick. It's only 3 lines. It's really easy to do. It's a great jump in, but it's ugly. It's really ugly. It's worse than VB. That's like, they didn't think that was possible. So you don't hook girls with ugly. You just don't. Yeah, so I needed something pretty. And we looked at the options. We looked at T-Kinter. We looked at Pygame, which you can use for games. It's great. We use it in 9 and 10 now for game development. But actually, the girls kind of grow out of games faster than boys do. And so they get to year 10 and they're like, another game. And so when they get to year 11 and 12, they're like, we want to solve the problems of the world. And so they don't want to do the game anymore. They want to actually have a real problem that they're solving. So Pygame really is, I know you can make UI with it, but it really is sprite-based. It really is gamey. And even when you make a menu system in it, it still looks like Pygame. So this is the Hello World for Kivy, which is what we're going to be talking about. Right, so it's a bit longer and it's got a big problem in the middle of it, and I'll talk to that later. But it turns blue. It does an automatic resize. The button fills the screen wherever it is, you know, it's prettier. And actually that's a really big thing with girls. I know that shouldn't be, but it is. So that's where we ended up with Kivy, and that was 4 years ago. I implemented Kivy into year 11. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had done some tutorials. I'm like, I've been Python coding for 5 years now. I'll be fine. Oh my goodness. So it was a steep learning curve. This is the native, it was one of the native tutorials that comes with Kivy, which is actually really nice, but it's not one of the ones I use anymore, and there's reasons for that, and I'll explain in a second. So it's just a cute little paint app, and you can do it in not very much code, and it's touch enabled, so they've got surfaces, which means that they can feel like they're actually making an app, because they could imagine it being on a phone or a tablet sometime in the future. And that's a big thing about Kivy. Okay, so we got to this point, and then we had to deal with classes. And classes are great when you're a coder, when you really do program, when you've done CS. Classes are the solution to so many problems, but it's not really in our syllabus, and it's a huge learning curve. It was massive, and I regularly have year 11s in tears. Girls cry, boys tend not to, girls do. So the fact that they had to get their head around how objects worked and stuff like that, just to follow a tutorial, has been really hard. The good thing about classes, and there is a good thing, once they persist with it, it really makes them think about what behaviours are attached to that screen or that thing that they're trying to do, that button. You know, what am I actually? What does it own? What does it do? and then write functions. And functions are in the syllabus and are really important, and they need to know how to do it. And to be honest, when they do Python, even in text-based, in idle, they're still using objects. You know, they're using methods and they're assigning attributes, and they just have to think about the link between what have I done in Grok this week, and how does that relate to a class or an object. Yeah, so we've persisted with it. I just want to show you the thing that we've been doing as Take 2 Introduction to Kivy with Year 11. And it's not open. Please be open. Okay. So the first time I ran it, Kivy, I ran it tutorial-based from the website. Kivy.org is great, has some great resources, has a really good database of what their stuff does, so you can really read what every single widget does and all of its behaviours in detail. Girls don't read, kids don't read. But this is what we did for Take 2. So rather than it being a tutorial where they're following along, all they tended to do was copy huge chunks of code from the screen that had the tutorial in it into their idle window and then go, oh, it didn't work, I don't know why. And because they hadn't really thought about what each of the lines was doing, they weren't really synthesizing what they were doing. So Take 2 on this has been much more successful, which is I get the girls at the beginning of the year. We have an incursion and we invite the external students in, and that's really valuable because it kind of forms some class cohesion. Some of them can't come. We open up a Hangouts or something if they can make it. A whole day online though is pretty full on. Anyway, we do an incursion just on Kivy, just so that at the end of the day, they've made something. We've made something as a class, and this is the only thing we do as a group. And that's a shame, but it's kind of the nature of an online course, and also the nature of an 11-12 course, in that it tends to be competitive and you're trying to do rankings. Our class sizes are really small, which is why they're online in the first place. And so it's really nice to kick off Year 11 with something where they're working as a team. So we do a really lousy scope at the beginning. I tell them that we're going to make something that has to have buttons, has to have interaction, has to have 2 screens, and then they come up with an idea. And then they, and with a lot of help from me, build that idea. And it's really simple. It's a simple idea, but it's not a major work by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a tutorial that they're building themselves as they go. And so how do I make a button on the screen? Well, who's going to research that? And so this is what we came up with. Did I mention girls like pretty? So we have a childhood app, which could be put on a tablet, in theory iOS, but I don't have any. And when you click on the animal, oh, it's failed. Good. Okay. In theory, when you click on the animal, it worked this morning. When you click on the animal, it opens up a second screen which shows you a photo of the animal, what the animal's sound is, and what the animal's name is, so that you can, it's for a learning app for a young child. But having a scope that they get to have input into, I've got templates for a lot of this stuff that we're altering. It really works to introduce them into the language, and then they're meant to comment the code extensively so that when they do come to the next assignment, which they have to do individually, they've got these building blocks that they can then slot together. And really, what is programming but building blocks that you're slotting together? I know that there are big problems being solved with entirely unique thinking, but it's usually not happening in Year 11 and 12. Okay. Yes, I want to kill it. It didn't work. Okay. Sorry? Oh, no. It wasn't because of sound. It wasn't actually changing screens, but thank you. Okay. So then, what are our pros and cons? There are some big pros. One is this. This is a Kivy file, and it's what Kivy was named after. And it allows you to use this kind of weird tagging language to define what bits go where. And then your behaviours are inside the Py file, which is class-based and functions. It allows you to keep the UX away from the programming, which is actually good. It's good thinking. In theory, you could come along and reskin the thing and it would just work because it's just opening this one KV file. And I think that's brilliant, and I think it's good practice to teach the girls. It means that their code works regardless of the UI, and they could, in theory, take it to a website or take it to something else or do it in Pygame. It all just is going to behave the same way. So that's really big. The other thing is that it's free. It's really important because I've got external students. And so with those two things as being, and it's pretty, which is not to be underestimated. With those three things, that's why we're still persisting. But there are some negatives, and I'm going to walk you through some of them. The class thing is a really big problem. I know that people use classes all the time. Girls tend to be a bit tentative. Well, my students tend to be a bit tentative. They want to be told how to do stuff rather than go and play with stuff. So they see classes which they've never heard of before at the beginning of year 11 and they start asking if they should dump this subject, which is really unfair. But it just means that we've got to get them over that hump. And so there's a lot of hand-holding in year 11. There is an option topic in software design that you can learn something about class object-oriented programming is in there, but it's not part of the core, and it's really tangentially mentioned. So it's not really worth doing the option topic to try and take use of the objects. I think that when digital technologies someday comes to New South Wales and it gets pushed up from underneath, year 11 and 12 are going to have to change, and the best way for it to change is to incorporate objects in a more real way. And so I think that it's a good direction to be heading. And when they go to uni, they're going to have to do this stuff anyway, but there is some freak out at that beginning stage. The next problem is, when I first implemented Kivy, we had Python 2. Blah, and Kivy only worked with Python 2. It's now changed, it's been updated, so it now works with Python 3, and that's a big few for us because we use Grok Learning and we use all of these resources that are Python 3, and so getting the kids to, run 2 implementations of Python and also, they're still learning a language. To translate between 2 is really frustrating, and so brackets being in the wrong place and print statements, and they'd start to cry. So that's great, that's fixed. Awesome. The problem is that the first time we did this, the year 12s actually had an app to take home. They could take home one of the school's tablets and show their parents their app. They could bring in dad's Android phone, because girls don't have Android, and they could download it to that, the APK to that, and they could run it. They actually could have this real implementation of their app. It is extraordinarily hard to do this to do the APK creation with Windows and Python 3 and Kivy, whatever we're up to. It's just inordinately hard. I don't have terminal, so that's a big downside. All of the code is written for terminal and then sometimes converted to a command prompt, and I'm not clever enough to work out how to do that. And so we had a bit of a disappointing end to the project this year where they had got their stuff working, and I'm about to show you them, but they just couldn't get it to that last final step of having an APK, which is a real shame. I mean, it didn't affect their marks. It wasn't in the marking guide, but it affects their psyche. It affects emotional attachment to this project that they've worked on for months. Okay. So the other thing, and you might see evidence of it in the project, is that the girls tend to think rigidly in boxes and layouts. Kivy is a layout-built UX, and so everything is hierarchical in nature, and the buttons go next to buttons, and that makes things easy, and that's why I like the KV file, but at the same time it does limit your thinking, and so all the storyboards I had was just a grid of boxes, and I just wish that they could see some flexibility there. It is possible to be flexible, but it reminds me of back in the day when I was doing HTML pre-CSS3, and everything was in a frame or a table. That's how they think, that everything's laid out in a table. So that's a bit of a downside. But it's not, none of these downsides are big enough for us not to be continuing with this. We're excited by it. It's a really cool way of making UI for Python, despite those couple of drawbacks. So now, show and tell time. Yay! Okay, the girls get to choose what they want to do. There is a whole lot of choose your own adventure in Year 12, and this, there are some criteria that they have to meet, and the biggest one is that they have to do file processing. It's always in the HSC, they have to know it, and so I figured that it's best to put it in the assignment that they live and breathe for several months rather than just learning it in the classroom. So please work this time. Right. So this is, I really like that these girls believed in their projects, that they chose them, that they decided that this was a problem that needed solving. And this one is, I'm really disorganized, and there are two that are very like this. I'm really disorganized and I need something that's going to keep me organized. So she has a way of adding tasks with due dates, and she's got up and down buttons and names, and whether it's urgent or important or necessary or optional. And then she can just set it. And so then it actually, when the app first opens, it goes and checks what's in the table. It's just a text file, so just in the text file, it opens it up, it pulls it into a dictionary, it then adds to the dictionary or adjusts things. So see, this is what I mean by the everything's a table. Okay, next one. I really should have ordered these better. Okay, this one, I think I'll do a really quick showing of the other one, and then I'll show you the last one. Yep. Okay, so this one does a better job of the layout. Okay, they didn't turn off their print statements that were doing the debugging for them. Awesome. Okay, so it comes in, jumps into a screen that shows her what's overdue. Not everything was overdue when she submitted it, but time has passed since then. She can add a new thing. She can go to the calendar view to see what's on what day. It's pretty cool. She found a calendar picker app, a plugin, and she asked me if she could use it. And she can, in Year 12, you can use it. You just have to document where you got it from and make sure that the IP is covered. And then we worked out that it was for Python 2 in Kivy and not Python 3 in Kivy. So complete fail. So instead of crying, this is one of the more resilient children, she went home and wrote her own. So I was proud, very proud. And the last one, this is the one that I really particularly like, the problem she was trying to solve. Does anybody know what IGSA is? It's the girls' school sports thing. And so you go to IGSA to find out where you're playing in hockey this week or whatever. she had had enough of going to IGSA and having to download the CSV and open it and find out where. So she just went and wrote an app that would allow you to choose which school you're from, which team you're in, and to go and scrape the CSV for your games. That's a real problem. And I really like how Kivy does resizing, but it does a really lousy job of labels. Could you see that? Did you see how the label? Yeah, great. Yeah, so that's my show and tell, and that's why we're sticking with Kivy, and thank you very much. Are there any questions?
No.
Teacher voices.
So do your students use the visual editor for Kivy at all?
No.
Or have you had a look at the visual editor?
I had a look at it. It was a lot of the stuff had already been written by the time the visual editor came around, and so yeah, it's a time thing. I have to sit down and work out how to work with it with the Year 11s and I'll do it for next year.
Is the package installation straightforward?
Installing Kivy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've just had a lot of troubles with getting dependencies and such with other systems, but yeah.
It wasn't. It was really ugly, and you had to, especially in Windows, you had to send to a Kivy batch file to make it run. And that was driving everybody crazy, right-clicking and going to send to. We learnt the keyboard shortcuts really fast to compile it every time we needed to run it. But you just saw that this was running from idle. So there's some. You have to go through the command prompt to do the install, and there's some pip stuff in there that is a bit beyond me. But you just follow the line-by-line instructions, and it's pretty good.
Any other questions?
Up the back.
Just on Kivy, I've sort of thought about dipping my toes in with that just as an easy way into the app world for a mere sort of console Python programmer.
Yep.
Is it possible to make really sexy, high-quality apps that you'd sort of release to the world with Kivy?
It really is.
Yeah?
Do you have Windows?
No.
It's really not easy on Windows. It's really easy if you've got Terminal. Apple Linux is fine, and all the instructions are on the website as to how to package it up. You can do both iOS and APK. There's some really cool animation stuff. There's some stuff built in, but you can even change the libraries of buttons and stuff. It's just beyond my Year 11 and 12s.
Yeah, of course. So it's feasible to say this is the platform I'm using for my graphical apps and kind of learn that one if you're going to learn one.
I would think so. I really like that it allows you to go iOS or Android.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some really cool stuff in there that talks to the sensors in your phone. Yeah, as I said, it's just beyond us.
Cool,
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
This will be the last question.
With regards to the first problem that you had, how easy is it to debug issues that you're having like that?
Okay, 4 years ago, I was less excited about the debugging. It seemed because it went through the Python engine, Pygame, it had this. Every third error was exactly the same. It was something about an umbrella, and nobody could tell what it meant. And even the web was no help. They're like, yeah, it's just bad debugging. But now we're finding that it's identifying lines. It's telling you exactly where things are a problem. It still doesn't like tabbing issues in the KV file and colon issues. But apart from that, you pretty well know what your problem is. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much, Amanda. We have the speaker gift for you.
Thank you very much.